Hello, everyone. I hope you're feeling refreshed after our break. I'm really excited to be here with you today. If we haven't met before, my name is Massella. I lead workplace strategy at Charter. And this is a very exciting conversation. We've been talking about how to get to the other side of the messy middle of AI adoption. And this conversation is a little bit different in that I want to talk a bit about what we do when we get there. And specifically when we think about skills and learning and what that means for employees of today and in the future, we want to understand what actually makes somebody valuable. So as AI takes over more routine tasks and even some analytical tasks, organizations are now sort of grappling with this idea that the things that we've historically really assessed or judged people by, credentials, poise, how they actually are showing up with speed and output, may not actually be the correct scoreboard anymore. And so I think the real differentiators that are really kind of bubbling to the top are things that are a lot more human: judgment, our learning agility, just even the way that we are thinking about our own thinking. We are joined by two incredible leaders who are very much in the thick of this right now and grappling with it in real time at their own organizations. We have Heather Stefanski, who is a partner and chief learning and development officer at McKinsey, and Melanie Rosenwasser, who is the chief people officer at Dropbox. Before we dive in, though, just a bit of context to set the scene. Soft or durable skills, by definition, are the interpersonal, emotional, and behavioral capabilities that shape how we work, how we solve problems, and how we navigate complexity. My own career has been built on the idea that these skills are foundational, they are not optional, and I've often seen that they are sort of the true tipping point from good performance to exceptional performance within organizations. So the difference now, though, is that AI is not just sort of automating tasks, it's really exposing where human skills and creativity matter and make a difference. So the goal of this conversation is to get practical. I want Melanie and Heather to help us understand what skills matter most, how companies are actually hiring and developing for them, and how they're actually rewiring their infrastructure to support the performance and the output that they're looking for. So ladies, I would love to just sort of dive right in. I'm curious from your purview, what skills matter most now that maybe didn't matter as much 5 years ago?
Can we start?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, very good. So I would say it's a little bit less of like what matters differently now than 5 years ago, and sort of putting a sharper point on what really matters. Mm-hmm. And so at McKinsey, critical thinking has always been absolutely important for us to deliver on the client service, and that will continue to be the case. And how we use that critical thinking to go beyond what AI can do is going to be critical. And then you also layer on, again, the human skills around building trust and relationships and what that will mean to create people who are distinctive people leaders that can, again, build strong relationships with their clients. I can't say those things weren't important, but they are now becoming more crisply important in what's going to drive our distinctiveness going forward. And then I would say the third thing that has also always been a part of McKinsey, which is this notion of we are a place to go to accelerate your learning. But we are really doubling down on faster learners. So we've actually changed something in our interview process around hiring for people that can truly demonstrate learning and growth. And then when they come to McKinsey, we don't just sort of take it for granted that they're going to learn more quickly, but we're doing things to be more intentional about how we create that faster learner. Because earlier we heard the conversation about change. It's not changing from A to B. It's changing from A to B to C to D to E. And what we need is an organization of people who are agile learners, and we want to be more intentional about them building those skills.
Yeah, thank you. Heather, what would you add to that? Sorry, Melanie.
No problem. So, I think with every advancement in technology, there's like really amazing benefits and also like some atrophying of certain skills, right? And so I think we're kind of at a place where critical thinking is becoming a little bit of an endangered species in our work, right? And knowledge work is actually becoming judgment work. And so at Dropbox, we've really we've done some external research, we've studied internally what makes our high performers tick in this environment, and we've come up with 4 durable skills, right? People are using this term, durable skills, and they are awareness. So this is really understanding yourself yourself and others, judgment, things like critical thinking, systems thinking, adaptability, so learning agility, right, is huge. These are people that upskill themselves. And then finally, connection, right? So how are you building trust in relationships? And we believe that these durable skills transcend, right? They transcend technology. They've always been important, right? To Heather's point, I just think they're becoming more important now in this kind of AI renaissance that we're in.
Yeah. The thing I'm hearing is this exclamation point on skills that have always mattered, and something that you touched on, Melanie, that I think is important is this idea that like awareness is fundamental to it. Thinking critically requires awareness. Understanding that you have to sort of move quickly when you're learning matters. And I'm just curious about how you are actually helping to sort of reshape people's thinking about their own thinking. Heather, you had posted something on LinkedIn talking about the fact that AI actually amplifies creativity for people who think about their own thinking. Can you tell us more about what you mean by that?
Yeah. So it's this concept of metacognition, or you described it as awareness, of really understanding what's going on under the surface. And so, again, it's something that McKinsey has always really thought about. So, for example, in our interview process, if any of you have been through a McKinsey interview, we care not just only about what the what is, so like how you influence somebody, but we ask you questions about the why. We want to understand how you're thinking about that and what that looks like. The same thing is if you go to one of our learning programs, it will always have in it moments of reflection where you're really thinking about metacognition. And what we're learning is that people that use AI in a way where they're thoughtful, with this awareness, with a judgment, with a critical thinking, and they're questioning it and questioning the answers, those are the people that are actually able to then be more creative or perform higher. Come up with the answers that are beyond what AI can deliver. And so we're really, again, it's something we've always cared about, but we're leaning into more to say, how can we ensure everybody has that metacognition, that awareness, so they can push beyond just the answer that AI gives it.
How do you hire for metacognition, for both of you? Like, two questions actually related. One, how do you hire for it? And the second thing is, can you teach it to existing workers?
Yeah. So if awareness is sort of noticing, right, I think metacognition is noticing and acting. So now that you know, right, what are you doing differently, now that you understand how you think? And culturally, Dropbox is a virtual first company, right? And so being remote first, we do a lot of asynchronous communication, right? So we have to communicate a lot in writing. And what that means is not only are we communicating what we're doing, we're communicating the why behind it, right? So sort of the assumptions that we've made, the thinking that went behind our proposal. So this has kind of always been part of how we work. We do things like we publish postmortem. So if we have a feature or a product that did not do as well, we think critically about what happened, what was flawed in our decision making and our assumptions, and we publish those postmortems to our entire company. So this is really cultural for us, and it has been for a long time. And I think you can test for it if you ask the right questions. So in classic behavioral interviewing, you'll say something like, tell me about a time when you did blah, 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 right? When you're testing for metacognition, it's tell me about a time when you did this. Tell me about your assumptions. Tell me about how those assumptions may have changed over time, right? How did you adapt to it? So I think it's really more in how you are framing the question that you can really get, you can get signal on this.
Yeah. How, and I'm curious just what you've seen work or even fail, as a response to this. How do you know that you are not just meeting somebody who knows how to interview well, right? So when we think about behavior, we've all come across them, and maybe some of us are them, where you can answer well. I'm like, sure, I thought about, and these were my assumptions, and of course AI can absolutely assist you through that. And the thing about it is, like, it is so much more expensive to figure out that this person can't think about their own thinking 5 months into the job. How do you actually discern that this is somebody who's going to be able to grow into the type of employee and contributor that you are looking for?
Yeah. So it's a great question, and you can imagine the industry that's out there to help people prepare for McKinsey interviews, right? Yeah. I think I was reading on some website which is basically like, you pay me $3,000 and I guarantee I'll get you from a first round to a final round at McKinsey. So this is a problem like we care a lot about. And wild, right? And we absolutely, as you described, do those behavioral interviews. But if you actually know how to answer those questions, to your point, you can manage them. So one of the things we started with our problem solving, and now we're rolling out a similar thing for our kind of behavioral interviews. We use this game called Solve. And the game is actually a made-up world. It's a made-up world of which is an ecosystem, right? And it's a video game. And you play it, and it's kind of fun, but it also is testing for us the problem solving and thinking. And it's something you really can't prepare for, right? Because again, it's this like natural world that you get, and depending on what paths you take, the video game takes you down a different path. And so we've been doing this with our problem solving, and we've done it both from a perspective of helping us get some better reads, but it also creates a more equitable opportunity for people, because it means if you don't have a business background and you haven't been trained in a lot of business terms, you can still do really well on this game, and we can understand your problem-solving capability.
Yeah.
We are now rolling out a similar game around our behavioral assessment. So again, rather than asking like, what did you do? And tell me about what you did that you compare the answer for, it's actually having to react in real time, right? And when you have to react in real time and sort of understand your assumptions and what you're thinking and how you're operating, it's very different. And so again, we've done this both from a perspective as we believe it will help us get crisper on our interviewing techniques and our assessment, but also because it actually provides us much more opportunity to a much broader range of talent, both because it's, again, easier to administer, and because it's not relying on someone who can afford to pay $3,000 to prepare for a McKinsey case interview.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It sounds like Succession, like who's going to take over the company? Let's see, can we plot it back to this time? I want to zoom in a little bit, though, zoom out from the enterprise level. How are each of you personally developing these skills on your own teams? Because I think that that's a great place to make the case study for what needs to come next.
Yeah. Well, I think there's sort of this polarity that's occurring now where we, even right now, are saying, like, double down on what makes you uniquely human. And then we interject technology into like every single facet of our lives, and we're like, but be more human. And I work in tech, so like I'm guilty of doing this too. And I was just at a webinar of an industry HR leader who said learning and development is dead with AI, and there's no such thing as classroom learning in the future. And we do not believe this is true. We are going the other way. If the future is human, we really need to embrace like analog ways of being and thinking. So I'm about to facilitate a C-suite offsite in a month. It is no devices. It is meditating, journaling, breath work, company visioning, right? This stuff that you're like, that seems a little bit odd. But again, this is to ground us in what it is to be human and to be connected to each other. And I think we have to get comfortable there. There's been all of these studies now that are coming out on how today generations are underperforming their parents cognitively for the first time in history. And they're blaming it on digital learning platforms. I'm not saying it's bad. Of course, we need both. We need, right, like in the flow of learning. But we really need to think critically about how to address this. And then you add in some of the social dynamics, right, that are happening to generations with social media and devices. These things are coming together, and we as L&D professionals and HR professionals have to contend with this combination in the future. So we need to rethink modalities, right, which we're doing now. Go outside, be together, no devices, that type of thing. But also think about what skills we're going to need to navigate some of this. Things like attention span training, learning to unlearn, right, like decades of preferences that don't serve us, actually, right? And so these are some of the things we're thinking about, some of the things we're experimenting with.
So a quick follow-up on that. As somebody who comes from the origin of L&D, like this is my bread and butter, the thing that excites me, but we have fought for so long to get our senior leaders and boards and whomever to believe that this matters and that it's not just a nice to have. How are you convincing them that you're going to spend however many thousands of dollars doing breath work?
That's a great question. I think it's actually quite simple. If the future is human, then the way in which we facilitate development has to be grounded in humanity. And that does not happen when you're staring at a screen all day long. It just doesn't. And so, but I also think it's like, why not try, right? So we're actually measuring like pre and post, things like trust, relationships, you know, these types of capabilities like pre and post, these types of offsites. And over time, I have a feeling that that will prove it out, and then we'll be able to scale it. But even most recently, right, our talent acquisition team, extremely high performing, beating every industry benchmark. Eric is here, he leads our team. But in their offsite last week, they were not like in a basement coding on Workato or whatever. They were like out in the middle of the ocean kayaking together, right? These things matter. You can have a high performing team and embrace the things that make you human.
Yeah. The other thing I would say is we've also expanded our in-person learning, particularly with our senior leaders. And the thing I would say is they're all recognizing that the pace of change and what is being asked of them, is more likely to put them in, we call it this notion of a survivor mode versus being a self-author. Mm-hmm. And so helping to support them how to stay grounded in this time of increasing change and increasing kind of ambiguity and what's expected of them is rising. And so I also am sort of seeing a little bit of a need from those senior leaders themselves to say, hey, like I actually need some more leadership support. So, again, I won't say it's a massive shift, and I got to say I still would have a lot of trouble getting a bunch of McKinsey senior partners to sit around and do breath work. But we are doing some of it. And one of the things that actually has been really compelling is we've actually brought in a lot of experts from the military, and particularly from the Navy SEALs. And I don't know if you guys have seen the recent studies with the Navy SEALs and how they got their teams to the next level of performance, right? And they got them to that next level of performance through more grounding, through breath work, through understanding what was needed. And so we're also looking at that, and we're looking at athletes and human athletes, and to say, okay, what is it that we do, what you see where the athletes get to the very best levels of performance, what does that look like, right? It often looks like cycles of 2 to 3 weeks of intense training and then a week that you pull back. And if that's how we see these people get to the highest level of performance, and that actually is resonating with our leaders when we look at both athletes and the Navy SEALs. And so we're trying to work some of that in to sort of say, like, how do you get to that highest level of performance?
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating that the two things, right, are skills that we're trying to gain that are going to push the organization and our work forward is sort of being integrated with these very soft, durable human skills. And I guess 2 questions for you. The first, before we wrap, is just why integrate rather than keeping them in 2 separate tracks? Because I think that's also another angle that people might approach.
Yeah. So I would say that's one of the other things that if you talk about what is the biggest shift that we've done over the last, let's say, 6 months in our learning, is we were doing a lot of tech upskilling and leadership training, right? And now we're basically doing it all together. So what that means is I'm teaching a problem-solving process in a new way that includes both the tech and the problem-solving, where I can bring out the metacognition, where I love the recent work on the Flynn effect and the reverse Flynn effect you were talking about around. And one of the things it says is you need to create those moments of what the human does, right? And then also create those moments of reflection on what the AI does and the human does. And so as we're teaching problem solving, for example, we're teaching it in that way. We're saying, here's what the human needs to do up front, is really spend some time defining the problem. Okay, now you can go work with AI on like doing some analysis, et cetera. Now the human's going to come back together and say, okay, based on that, now what do we do? How would we apply this to our specific client context? What's going to work with them versus what might not work with them?
Yeah. Okay, rapid fire, because we've just got about 30 seconds. In some roles, parts of the job that people really took pride in, maybe it was writing code or building decks, those things are increasingly being handled by AI. So what makes a high performer of the future?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I think moving the conversation from efficiency, right, to value creation is really important. So really accelerating time to market, right, for products, for example, or really highlighting the value of the time that you're saving. So, for example, our engineers now, about 30% of the code that they generate is AI assisted. What are they doing with that time? We're not decreasing headcount, but we're actually allocating that time towards, they spend 3 times as much energy on technical debt. They spend twice as much energy on security and reliability, and these are things that actually retain customers. So it's shifting the conversation to impact and using that kind of like time and energy that you're saving to actually create value.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. We're focused on business impact. And you would say, We do create a lot of PowerPoint slides, but let me tell you, they don't always create impact. And I would say if we told our analysts and our associates, hey guys, you could actually create 50% less PowerPoint slides, or maybe they go away altogether, and instead you're really building solutions that are you're gonna co-create with a client that are gonna drive business outcomes, they would all be thrilled, right? I don't think they'll lose their identity because they can't create some PowerPoint slides.
You never know. Thank you all so much for being here. Heather, Melanie, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much. Thank you.